Thank you for coming to this great session convened by one to shine a light on the taxation of the extractive sector so that we can optimize on domestic resource mobilization and a couple the tax regime on the continent and is relevant to resource-rich countries. The second objective is to discuss national fiscal regimes in selected countries and their impact on revenue generation. The third objective is also to pick country experiences that are grounded, negative or positive, so that we can at least learn from each other on how to come up with the responsive fiscal regimes. So I did not start by greeting you. I think that's unprocedural. So greeting, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are from. And we thank you again for joining. We have also a fantastic panel here to help us ventilate this discussion, which is quite critical on taxation of the extractive sector. We have with me here Fatima Mondire, PWYP Mozambique. We also have got Viola Terrace, a policy advisor on tax and extractives industry with the IGF, that is the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development. We also have got Gideon Tukwase, PWYP Uganda, and Rachel Chagonja with PWYP Tanzania. We also have got Tiali Faye with Oxfam Senegal. So this is the fantastic lineup of panelists that we have to help us to with this important discussion that we are going to have. Please be advised that you can introduce yourself via the chat box and make sure that you can also add to your names the country that where you are from so that people can easily pick you. Make also use of the question and answer session to be able to ask some questions, comments, and interact also as participants and the presenters in the chat box so that we can at least have many be multidimensional in terms of how we grapple with the discussion that we have. So from now, let me introduce you to, let me give the platform to Viola Terrace with IGF to help us understand the global discussions. What are the implications for the extractive sector taxation in looking at Africa? What is at stake? So can you please, Viola, take the floor? You can do that in 10 minutes, but you've got a contingent for another 5 minutes to wrap up the conversation.
Can everyone hear me?
Clear, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Sorry, Viola, are you having a challenge? Viola, can you hear me?
Okay, thank you very much. My name, for a minute, I couldn't hear you, Makasiri. I don't know why, but I hope you can hear me okay. Thumbs up, or anyone can just unmute and tell me that you can hear me.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Viola Terrace. I'm a policy advisor with Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development. I'll make a few remarks on just the regional and the global front. I'll turn off my video just to maximize on my bandwidth. There we go. As mentioned, I work for the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development. It supports 75 member countries to improve resource governance and decision-making in the mining sector. We work with partners, including the African Tax Administration Forum, the OECD, to address tax base erosion and profit shifting in the mining sector, which is a very important topic. We publish guidance documents on the same. We work on technical assistance through audit support, capacity building, and advisory services to strengthen the mining fiscal regimes and revenue administration. IGF also works on environmental and social impact assessments, local content, as well as the ASM sector. IGF acknowledges the role of civil society and non-governmental stakeholders, including other regional blocs, in advancing the conversation on optimizing mining revenues. Civil society has been at the forefront for change in the resource sector. A couple of issues is on transparency and accountability, holding government and private sector to account, data reporting, illicit financial flows, as well as revenue distribution, which then has an impact. And we acknowledge that mining revenues has an impact on inequality. It can be used to bridge inequality, reduce debt dependency, and also finance sustainable development. And this all has been brought, this conversation that's being spearheaded by the Publish What You Pay is an important conversation. Going back to the mining sector, I would say the mining sector right now is undergoing a revolution. It is, and it's one of the biggest sectors capable of financing development. The projected demand, again, by a report by World Bank just released a few months ago, the projected demand for metals and minerals because of energy transition is huge, others going up to 250%. Looking at technological innovation, this will also increase the mining operation efficiency. It will prolong the life of a minefield, which before could not. And again, we are seeing new entrants, including Telsa, into the market, which is going to change the business models. We're also going to see automation reducing labor in the fields, but then that also has a very big impact on the mining revenues. So mining is an important sector, but we see that if we maximize on revenue collection, we are able to sort of reap more from the sector, and it can be used to finance sustainable development. But then over the years, mining has fallen short to contribute to this agenda because of the things I've mentioned above, including illicit financial flows. But we see the opportunity that the mining sector has, and now we think that this is the time to take stock of the mining sector. Intergovernmental Forum and ATAF have initiated a conversation on the future of resource taxation. And the key questions that we seek to answer is, what is the dominant fiscal regime in the sector, which is the income, normally it's the royalty and income tax. How can we improve its design and implementation? And the second question we seek to answer is, are there alternative options available for resource-rich countries to maximize the returns from their mineral wealth? We think these two conversations should be had, and it should be had in a consultative forum, bringing in together civil society who have sort of continued with this mining agenda across Africa and across the region, including the private sector as well, and other non-governmental stakeholders and government as well. We seek a process that tries to unite the different stakeholders in advancing these two conversations. So IGF and ATAF are inviting civil society to engage directly with government officials to influence tax administration and fiscal policies in resource-rich developing countries. If you can just share my slides, please, for a minute. That'll be helpful. Thank you. And so IGF and ATAF are coming together to engage with non-governmental stakeholders to collect ideas. And these ideas we think should be innovative and forward-looking ideas that are responsive to the fiscal regime currently being implemented in the mining sector on how to improve them, but also to challenge the government officials on new ideas, alternative options that we can use to maximize on the revenues from the mineral wealth. We think this is the time. We need to do it together. We need to do it in advance. We need to start this conversation right now to be able to support government, to be able to influence government on policies and tax administration instruments in resource-rich developing countries to enable us to maximize on our revenue collection. So IGF have put up a call for proposals together with ATAF to collect ideas from non-governmental stakeholders. And these ideas, what we are not taking ownership of these ideas, but what we're going to do with these ideas is to work jointly with non-governmental organizations and individuals in the sector to help us work together and unpack these ideas to see how this can work practically, how this can be implemented by governments to be able to maximize on revenue collection. Next slide, please. So what we are inviting the non-governmental stakeholders is to submit ideas on on future resource taxation. And roughly what we are looking for is where you pitch your idea, you address the problems in the mining sector that hinders revenue collection and the potential to maximize on revenue collection, and a short research plan to enable us to work with you together, to enable us pitch solutions to governments on how they can improve on their mining tax regime. I'm going to stop there, but I'm going to end with now is the right time to take stock of the mining sector. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Hi, Viola. This is from the Secretariat. There's a message in the chat asking for a link, if you're able to share it.
Yes.
There's also a question in the Q&A addressed to you, Viola. I don't know if you can see it. The question is the vision only includes mineral resources or extractive products as well, oil and gas? I don't know if you're able to answer this now.
Sorry, I'm now available. I had lost my internet a little bit. Thanks, Viola, for that great presentation, I'm sure. And there's a question that is to come on board. I think for now, to get also the momentum, let's take note of the questions that are coming and also interact on the chat box. We can respond. Can we give this opportunity to Rachel to share what's happening from the Tanzania, your grounded experiences? How are you interacting with the domestic resource mobilization in the extractive sector, the instruments that are there, the challenges that you are facing, any lessons that you may want to share with us in terms of opportunities? Over to you, Rachel. Just in case you are speaking, Rachel, unmute yourself, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Publisher to Pay friends. My name is Rachel Chagonja. I work with a civil society organization in Tanzania called Haki Rasilimali, which is the national affiliate of Publisher to Pay Global. Our main work as the civil society platform here is work around, we're centralized around research, analysis, capacity, and engagement to influence extractive sector-related policies, mobilizing community voices, but also enhancing capacity of stakeholders across all levels. Without taking so much time, I would like to share with you the experience of Tanzania in terms of understanding the tax regime, but also what are some of the policy and challenges that we're still facing in terms of maximizing revenue as accrued from the extractive sector. I'll follow what Viola had said before. Indeed, I would like to switch off my video so that I can make better use of my internet. So apologies for that. But however, I hope everybody is hearing me well. And I'll go straight to my main discussion is that the Tanzanian extractive sector is composed of the mining, oil, and natural gas. And the sector is governed by an elaborated policy and regulatory framework. So in terms of understanding the fiscal regime, this is about having a set of instruments that have been designed in country in a manner to determine the ways in which revenues are to be shared across all social groups, but also providing sufficient incentives for investment and providing measures to prevent and curb tax avoidance. Since 2015, to date, the government of Tanzania has constantly and continues to pass miscellaneous amendments, especially in the mining sector. So for those who are following the Tanzanian extractive sector history and trends, you'll understand there are a number of changes that have been happening for the past 5 years, of which these have aimed at increasing the government control and sovereignty, sovereign authorities over natural resources. And that the benefits of the extractive sector wealth have made significant changes to the current extractive regime. So with that regard is that because now we have a government and sovereign authority over natural resources, the state has been able to, has the right to impose less or more taxes so as to guarantee returns that are accrued from the sector. I'll give an example is that with the changes that have occurred within the current extractive, within the current regime is that, for instance, royalties for metallized minerals such as gold have been increased from 4% to 6%, whereas the gemstones have been increased from the 5% to 6%. With generated revenues have provided the government with an opportunity to continue to strengthen investment in different socio-economic projects that are expected to lead into economic growth and diversification through employment, backward and forward linkages. So the composition of our fiscal regime is mainly composed of the fiscal and non-fiscal benefits that are charged on investment at central and local levels. So looking at fiscal benefits, here we're talking about royalties, taxes, and fees that mostly are charged at the central government, whereas at the local level, we have experienced a charge on non-fiscal social payments that have been able to promote local development and financing of social projects. But however, also at the local level, experience show that local government authorities have been able, under the Local Government Finance Act, to charge on service levies and other fees that are related to community development. So at the central level, as I said, the charges are on royalty, taxes, and fees, and these are, among others, minus royalties, we also have corporate taxes, VAT, import duties, tolls, development levies, withholding tax, among others. And at local level, we're charging at service levies, corporate social responsibilities, and local content plans. However, we cannot talk about the current fiscal regime and changes without hinting on the state participation. So after the enactment of the natural resource related laws in 2017, the level of state participation was subjected to negotiations that shifted to a current model of having also a 16% of non-diluted free carried interest in the share of capital investment. But also we are now practicing a principle of 50-50 share of all economic benefits as generated from investment. And this is a good example we learned from the ongoing negotiations and the completed framework agreement between Tanzania and Barrick Gold in Tanzania that has resulted in the formation of the trigger minerals. There are a number of discussions to what extent has this now framework agreement that is being imposed in the mining sector will continue to impact on the current fiscal or existing fiscal regime, as such proceedings were not applicable in the existing mineral development agreements or those that are related to PSAs. However, as I said, we have another law that was enacted for the purpose of giving strength to the government to be able to review the MDAs, but also a space to renegotiate on better terms for the government. So the practice now is that most of the ongoing negotiations that are happening, that have given a new shift to the mining sector in the country, mostly using the Barrick model that has been agreed since late last year. Also, another issue to note is that all tax incentives that are to be computed, all tax incentives that are being provided within the regime need to be are computed and converted into government equity. However, the challenges with this is that we still have challenges within tax administration and that the potential for tax avoidance in the current manner is real, such as there's over the clearance of capital allowances and other operating expenditures. Also, there's a huge debate about the current tax regime being cumbersome for the sector, such that all taxes and charges that are coupled with capital intensiveness of the companies have increased the cost of doing business and directly affected the contribution of the sector. However, if you follow up the trend, for the past, Tanzania has been mining for the past 20 years, but again, the economic contribution of the sector to the general economy still stands at 1%. Factors that have affected positively or negatively such revenue generation is the area around sustainable competitiveness. It's still a huge discussion and has brought tension amongst stakeholders to the need to strike a balance between revenue maximization and continue to attract investment, especially investment on large-scale mining. Since the current negotiations, there have been no new investments that have occurred ever since the saga of Tanzania and Barrick. So we have no new investments. So there is need to continue to strike a balance so that we can increase the level of investment so as we can be able to maximize on revenue the generation. Tanzania Post leaders continue to rework on reforms related to taxes. For instance, taxes on value-added taxes have been reduced for both large scale, but also the artisan and small scale mining. The other factor is instability of the tax laws and conflicting related laws. We have a lot of conflicting laws, but also we have our law regime is not flexible. We have been having constant amendments that have impacted the current practices, but also we have a number of stabilization clauses in the contracts and laws that have also provided uncertainties among investors. So in the contractual part, you have stabilization clauses, whereas on amended laws as enacted in 2017, the stabilization clauses have been removed. Another issue of institutional capacity and coordination to record and monitor revenues generated from the sector is still a challenge in Tanzania. The responsible institutions have inadequate capacity in terms of proper recording, but also coordinating among institutions on how revenues could be leveraged. We have the Tanzania EATI that is responsible to undertake reconciliation, but there is no linkage between Tanzania EATI practices and practices of Tanzania Revenue Authority or issues of accountability with the parliament to understand or scrutinize revenues that are accrued from the sector. Again, reporting challenges on revenues that are accrued from the sector has given an unpredictable picture on exactly the contribution of the sector into the country. For instance, we find, reading through the EITI reports Tanzania, you find we have a lot, for the year of 2015-2016 reports, there were unreconciled royalties on the gas as reported by the EITI. So what key policy issues are needed to improve?
We have translators, so you can slow down a bit.
Oh, okay. Apologies. So to go to which key policy reforms to improve on revenues, again, I have 2 points that I want to highlight here. One is the issue of ring-fencing revenues from the extractives. There's been a campaign about having established funds to manage revenues from the sector. In Tanzania, with the oil and gas sector subsector, we have the oil fund that has been introduced under the Oil and Gas Revenue Management Act of 2015. However, the practice that fund has already been started to be put into that fund, but there are no reports of how much of that money has now been used, or no Tanzania EITI reports are not reporting on that fund. Also, the challenge with this is that the Oil and Gas Revenue Fund Management Act of 2015 that manages this fund does not have implementing regulation. So it is 5 years down the line that we have an act, but it's lacking implementing regulation. Issue number 2 is the issue of revenue sharing and redistribution model with local government. Currently, Tanzania does not have a formula for revenue for mineral revenue redistribution. It is the government policy that all minerals belong to the Tanzanians, so there is no need to have a specific percentage of revenue to communities surrounding the extractive communities. So according to the government, is that having a specific formula for sharing revenues will create unnecessary disunity among the society. For this reason, the only available mechanism is that local government authorities have the autonomy in their geographical area to impose any taxes, levies, fees, and charges as it is guided by the Local Government Finance Act of 2002. This practice has not been efficient because most of the revenues accrued from the extractive sector have been centralized. The only practice we are seeing is through national budget processes, whereby the government has decided to categorize share of all government revenues to specific groups, for instance, women and youth, elderly, and people with disability in a certain percentage. However, the actual distribution of this practice to these intended targets are not being effective. Communities still complain not benefiting from the sector, are not even being able to receive this funding that is being received from the government. All our extractive related revenues are still collected under consolidated fund. They are going into one government coffer, and it's difficult to track the extent to which to understand the amount to which revenues have added into the national budget. So what we call into this as the civil society is that with such a practice, there is high need for Tanzania to ensure to have a revised revenue sharing model for the local government authorities. To conclude is that revenue management in entirety requires transparency and accountability, contractual flaws, corruption practices that could be related to any unconscionable terms in the contracts. Inadequate local expertise have identified some of the continued challenges that we are realizing in the country. So we call upon the need to continue to review and amend laws that are related to the aspects, as I said before, to attract more investment, especially in the large-scale mining, but also having specific laws to address other resources beyond metallic minerals. I'll give an example is that we have Tanzania Mining Act of 2010 as amended. This Mining Act only favors people who are working in the metallic sector. However, for the gemstone and other minerals, it has been difficult to apply these laws. So there is need to have a law that will be able to feature in all extraction related, especially in the mining sector. Second is that Tanzania, for the past 30 years, despite the fact that with mining, we do not have a law that manages revenues as accrued from the mining sector. This is not the case with the oil and gas. As I said, we have the Oil and Gas Revenue Management Act that manages funds received from the oil and gas operations. Whereas in the mining sector, we do not have a specific law. So there is need to have discussions around intergenerational equity in terms of the mining practice in Tanzania. I understand that the government, the agenda of intergenerational equity, not only for Tanzania, but almost for resource-rich countries, the question for intergenerational equity has never been well tapped. And for us in Tanzania, the practice is being empowering on practices of local content. But the agenda for local content needs to be redefined so as to remove the jargon of the understanding between local and domestic business entities in the country. We need to propose for a domestic model to be able to ensure that there is domestic participation, but also need to remove all the misinterpretation and the mixing between corporate social responsibility and local content. So this is a practice in Tanzania, and it has been difficult for stakeholders to understand CSR practices and local content practices. Policies that are related to local participation have been a poor instruments for addressing the inadequate contribution of the sector, but also they have failed to manage public expectation. However, if we as the publisher to movement carry the agenda of local inclusion, that means it needs a unified discussion on the constitution of the local content policies in country and at the region wise. Lastly, there is need also to invest on discussion around forward and backward linkages, so as to which is the key issue for economic diversification. Failure to do so, that there'll be a high gap between the benefit that has been accrued from the central government and that is accrued from the local government. But also the question to link extractive related sectors with other sectors of economy is key to promote local participation, but also diversification of the community. And lastly, not least, is that I need to continue to invest in mass. Most of the time, the advocacy agenda has been carried out by a specific formalized groups, but there's inadequate investment that has been put to push the mass to the demand for to push for demand-driven advocacy agenda to influence decision and practices of the sector within their own localities. The question for formalization of the ASM sector for Tanzania is very key because the current practice shows that the ASM sector is contributing greatly to the ongoing revenues, while there's little that is being realized from the large scale. So Tanzania needs to work on policies and institutions to be able to formalize the ASM sector as key to increase revenue generation. Kasiri, a dear friend of mine once said, we cannot have equity if other people suffer. Others benefit in the disgust of national unity, while the rest are left in the darkness. With that quote, I would like to submit my presentation, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for sharing a detailed perspective and experience of Tanzania. Key issues there, talking about renegotiation of mining contracts, seeing state equity participation. I would want to know from you, is this working in terms of domestic resource mobilization, the lack of revenue sharing arrangements between the central government and local government? So that is another issue that Rachel has pointed out. And there are some questions that have also popped in, and I think you've feel free as well to interact via the chat box, the question and answer session with feel free to interact with the participants. and anyone else, feel free also to take advantage of that space to ask as many questions and raise comments and also the responses that you might have. To move forward, we want to come to West Africa, from Thiali, to understand in Senegal and West Africa what has been the experience like when it comes to raising revenue from the extractive sector, the challenges, opportunities that are there. Over to you, Thiali.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le modérateur. Moi, je m'appelle Charlie Faye, je travaille à Oxfam et je suis chargé de parler un peu de l'Afrique de l'Ouest de manière globale et du Sénégal en particulier, et parler de manière globale également du secteur extractif. C'est intéressant cette conférence africaine qui parle sur les ressources minérales de manière globale, parce qu'aujourd'hui en Afrique, on constate que nous avons énormément de ressources, mais le développement de l'Afrique tarde à venir à cause peut-être de la malgouvernance liée à ces ressources minérales. Aujourd'hui, dans le secteur extractif de manière globale en Afrique de l'Ouest, nous avons constaté que de manière globale, le régime fiscal, c'est un régime d'attractivité des investissements, mais également un régime, également de l'autre côté. D'un côté, c'est un régime d'attractivité des investissements, mais de l'autre côté, c'est un régime de préservation des intérêts de l'État. Pourquoi un régime d'attractivité des intérêts de l'État, d'attractivité des investissements? Parce qu'on constate qu'en phase d'exploration, qu'en phase de développement, nous avons constaté une neutralisation de la fiscalité. En quoi faisant? En essayant de donner le maximum d'incitation fiscale possible aux multinationales. Et donc, dans la période d'exploration, il y a une exonération totale, sauf pour les redevances, certaines redevances et droits fixes, mais en dehors de ça, toute la fiscalité est neutralisée. Et de même que également, il y a une exonération souvent partielle lorsqu'on est en phase de développement, parce que les gens se rendent compte qu'il est important pendant cette phase également de mettre en suspens un certain nombre de taxations, et une fois que l'exploitation démarre, qu'on puisse se rattraper par rapport à ces éléments. Donc c'est pourquoi on estime que ça soit de l'impôt sur, par exemple, de la fiscalité d'État comme de la fiscalité locale, comme la plupart on le constate en Afrique de l'Ouest, il y a ce qu'on appelle une fiscalité qui relève de l'État, mais une fiscalité dédiée spécifiquement aux collectivités territoriales. Et en fonction de cela, on se rend compte qu'on fait une exonération soit totale, mais ou bien une exonération partielle en fonction des différentes phases. À mon avis, c'est une chose sur laquelle qui nous pousse à dire que c'est une fiscalité d'attractivité des investissements en cette période précisément. Mais également, la fiscalité peut-être est rétablie petit à petit dans le cadre, par exemple, de l'exploitation, mais avec toujours des éléments d'attractivité. Ces éléments d'attractivité se constatent à travers la stabilité des régimes, parce qu'aujourd'hui, dans le cadre des contrats, que ce soit miniers ou pétroliers, nous avons, par exemple, la stabilisation fiscale qui se fait. Et souvent, malheureusement, dans nos États, au lieu d'adopter, par exemple, des clauses de stabilité, des clauses d'équilibre économique, on constate souvent des clauses de gel qui souvent ne nous donnent pas des marges de manœuvre pour pouvoir renégocier les conventions minières ou pétrolières. C'est pourquoi on dit qu'à cette période également, même si on est en phase d'exploitation, il y a également des éléments qui puissent nous permettre de dire qu'on est toujours dans l'attractivité à travers toujours ce qu'on appelle la stabilisation fiscale. Il y a également d'autres dispositions fiscaux concernant la compétitivité fiscale, notamment par exemple aujourd'hui on parle beaucoup de conventions On parle beaucoup de conventions fiscales, on parle également de tout ce qu'il y a comme les TBI, les traités bilatéraux d'investissement. C'est des éléments sur lesquels nos États souvent n'ont pas souvent de marge de manœuvre. Aujourd'hui, si on donne avec les conventions, les TBI, les traités bilatéraux d'investissement, si on donne des avantages à un État ou bien à une multinationale relevant d'un État qui est État partie de ce traité bilatéral d'investissement, un autre État ou bien une autre multinationale peut se permettre d'évoquer, par exemple, la clause, avec la clause de la nation la plus favorisée pour pouvoir bénéficier de cela, ou bien les clauses de non-concurrence, de non-discrimination entre les différents opérateurs économiques. Donc, c'est important de parler de cela. Ça également, ça donne d'autres opportunités aux compagnies, ça donne d'autres opportunités aux compagnies en période d'exploitation. Les conventions fiscales, les conventions de double non-imposition, souvent c'est fait pour éviter la double taxation ou bien lutter contre l'évasion fiscale, mais les compagnies peuvent également utiliser ces conventions fiscales pour échapper au paiement de l'impôt. Malheureusement, nos États ne signent pas souvent de conventions fiscales avec des pays qu'on ne qualifie pas de juridictions opaques, parce que c'est des juridictions non transparentes, des juridictions opaques qu'on appelle les paradis fiscaux, qui se permettent, par exemple, où on se permet de signer des conventions fiscales. Et si toutefois que ces conventions fiscales sont signées, maintenant, les multinationales profitent de cela pour pouvoir échapper au paiement de l'impôt. L'autre élément qui caractérise toujours l'attractivité souvent des investissements en cette période, c'est justement les modes alternatifs de règlement des conflits. Aujourd'hui, avec ce qu'on appelle la célérité, la rapidité et la célérité dans le monde des affaires, on se permet, par exemple, d'avoir des clauses d'arbitrage sur lesquelles on demande, par exemple, d'aller vers la CRDI ou bien l'arbitrage de la CEDEAO et autres. Et souvent, avec les rapports de force inégaux, naturellement, nos États n'ont pas la chance de s'en sortir si toutefois qu'il y a un différend qui lie les deux parties, notamment la compagnie et nos États. Ça, c'est ce qui relève de l'attractivité des investissements. Donc, je disais que la première partie, c'est l'attractivité, et ça se manifeste et ça se révèle en fonction de ce qui se passe, soit quand on est en phase d'exploitation ou bien quand on est en phase d'exploration. Maintenant, l'autre partie, c'est maintenant un régime fiscal qui essaie de préserver tant bien que mal les intérêts de l'État. Les intérêts, en quoi faisant? En essayant, par exemple, de miser la fiscalité sur un certain nombre de leviers. Le premier élément de mobilisation de revenus à travers la fiscalité, c'est quoi? C'est de créer des impôts qui sont assis sur la production. Les impôts qui sont assis sur la production nous permettent maintenant d'avoir tout ce qu'il y a comme type par exemple, aujourd'hui, il y a les impôts sur les impôts de droit commun, mais également un certain nombre d'impôts spécifiques qu'on retrouve dans le secteur soit minier ou pétrolier. Maintenant, avec les deux systèmes de taxation qui existent dans le secteur, c'est-à-dire la taxation classique qui se repose uniquement sur les impôts et les redevances, ou bien le système contractuel où maintenant les gens ont tendance beaucoup plus à, surtout dans le secteur pétrolier, à signer ce qu'on appelle les contrats de partage de production ou les contrats de services. Nos États ont tendance à avoir, au-delà de la fiscalité, d'autres aspects de mobilisation de revenus. Et à mon avis, c'est une chose importante et ça permet de préserver un tout petit peu les intérêts de l'État dans ce secteur-là. Et également, toujours dans le cadre de cela, en dehors des impôts assis sur la production, il y a également des impôts assis qui sont assis sur le profit. Donc aujourd'hui, les impôts assis sur la production vous permettent non seulement, avant même que l'entreprise ne puisse réaliser, par exemple, des bénéfices, etc., qu'on puisse taxer cette entreprise-là, mais également, une fois que l'entreprise réalise des bénéfices, des profits, également qu'on puisse taxer cela, et ça relève de la fiscalité classique, comme l'impôt sur les sociétés, l'impôt sur le revenu des personnes physiques, ainsi de suite. La taxation exceptionnelle ou la taxation des revenus exceptionnels, également, c'est une chose, à mon avis, importante, mais également la taxation sur un certain nombre d'exportations, sur l'exportation, etc. Donc, tout ça, ce sont des éléments importants qu'on retrouve en Afrique de l'Ouest et dans la plupart des États pour essayer de capter le maximum de ressources possibles dans le secteur extractif. Il y a également aujourd'hui une limitation, malgré tout cela, il faudrait qu'on limite davantage, par exemple, ce régime-là de mobilisation de revenus en essayant de renforcer, du moins, ce régime de mobilisation des revenus, en essayant de limiter tout ce qu'il y a comme optimisation fiscale ou bien d'évitement fiscal dans le secteur. Aujourd'hui, il y a plusieurs facteurs également qu'on retrouve dans nos États qui facilitent la mobilisation des revenus, parce que je vous parlais tantôt des conventions fiscales, des traités bilatéraux d'investissement et des codes d'investissement que nous avons dans nos États, qui sont souvent en porte-à-faux avec ce qui se fait à travers le Code général des impôts ou bien à travers les conventions minières ou pétrolières. Donc, du coup, ça, une lecture attentive, par exemple, de ces multinationales peut leur permettre, par exemple, de pouvoir échapper au paiement de l'impôt. De plus en plus, nos États également commencent à corser la législation sur tout ce qui concerne l'évasion fiscale, la fraude fiscale, les prix de transfert et ainsi de suite. Parce que c'est important de réfléchir à limiter ce qu'on appelle les flux financiers illicites. Tout ce qu'il y a comme hémorragie à travers nos États, et ça passe non seulement à travers l'évasion fiscale, à travers la fraude fiscale, à travers l'abus qu'on opère sur les prix de transfert, mais également en essayant, par exemple, de jouer sur la faiblesse de nos législations pour pouvoir échapper au paiement de l'impôt en utilisant surtout ces prix de transfert. Donc, à mon avis, c'est des choses importantes sur lesquelles il faudrait insister pour que nos États puissent davantage mobiliser des ressources domestiques, et c'est ce qu'on constate souvent dans nos États. Mais également, il est important, toujours à travers la fiscalité, de promouvoir le développement local. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, quand on parle de fiscalité et qu'on se limite juste à mobiliser des ressources et à l'investir au niveau national et en laissant les communautés à la base qui sont impactées, à mon avis, ça peut être un moyen de déséquilibre et d'inégalité sociale. C'est pourquoi nos États ont souvent tendance à créer des impôts locaux, à essayer de mobiliser des impôts locaux dans le cadre de ces exploitations. C'est pourquoi il y a un certain nombre d'impôts assis sur le foncier, et la plupart de nos États sont obligés, par exemple, d'attribuer ces impôts fonciers-là aux collectivités territoriales. À mon avis, c'est une chose importante. Il y a un certain nombre également d'impôts professionnels qui sont liés, par exemple, à l'exploitation au niveau local et qui bénéficient souvent également aux collectivités territoriales, et ce sont des impôts prélevés au niveau local et au profit de ces collectivités territoriales. Mais au-delà de ces impôts locaux, il y a également des dispositifs parafiscaux qui sont élaborés et qui peuvent profiter par exemple aux organisations ou bien aux collectivités territoriales pour également faciliter le développement local. C'est la notion de RSE. Aujourd'hui, c'est une notion qui est là et que les gens ont tendance souvent à parler, parce que c'est une responsabilité sociétale d'entreprise. Souvent, à travers la responsabilité sociétale d'entreprise qu'on qualifie souvent de volontaire, mais il y a des dispositions qui sont prises dès la signature des contrats qui relèvent de la RSE et qui se trouvent être obligatoires, parce que c'est déjà signé, ce sont des engagements que les compagnies ont déjà pris lors des négociations et qui pourraient profiter aux collectivités territoriales. C'est pourquoi il est important d'impliquer les collectivités territoriales dans le cadre des négociations, d'impliquer la société civile dans le cadre de ces négociations pour que ces autres parties prenantes puissent prendre en compte les intérêts des communautés. Mais également, il est important, toujours dans le cadre de ces négociations, de penser au développement local en essayant également de créer un certain nombre de fonds Parce qu'aujourd'hui, tantôt mes co-panélistes ont parlé de tout ce qu'il y a comme fonds intergénérationnels. Ils ont parlé des fonds dédiés à ces collectivités territoriales. Ce sont des alternatives qui permettent également de mobiliser davantage de ressources et également d'accompagner les communautés à la base pour assurer le développement local. De manière ramassée, voilà ce qui se fait en Afrique de l'Ouest pour ne pas trop monopoliser la parole, donner l'opportunité aux autres de pouvoir poser des questions et qu'on puisse réellement interagir dans le cadre de cette conférence africaine. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Tiale, for sharing West African experience, which is quite invaluable. The idea is to learn and share, exchange, so that at least we can find grounded experience. And oil and the prospects are so high. There's also conflict in Mozambique. It's a country that is also trying to rebuild after years and years of also conflict. What are the experiences have been like in terms of taxation of the extractive sector, looking at the oil, gas, and the mining sector from Mozambique?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. I will be speaking in Portuguese. And for the sake of quality of my network, in some stage I will be switching off my video. Bom, nós viemos de contexto em Moçambique em que o nosso regime fiscal era regime fiscal obsoleto. Estamos a falar de regime fiscal que datava da década de 80 e estava a reger contratos assinados no ano 2000. O primeiro contrato foi com a Sasol no ano 2000, e cujas atividades iniciaram em 2004, e depois com a Kenmar em 2007, depois seguiu-se com a Vale em 2009, e assim foi. Portanto, nós estamos a falar de regime fiscal. Sorry?
Fatima, I think we need to sort out the translation issue.
I can't hear you.
We need to sort out the translation.
Hello?
We have a challenge of interpretation. Yes, can you hear me now?
I cannot hear you, Mukasiri.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. Switch off. Ok. Bom, como eu dizia, nós estamos a vir de país num contexto em que o seu regime fiscal era bastante obsoleto para os contratos que foram assinados na década do ano 2000, no início do ano 2000, em que havia excessivo poder discricionário do governo de negociar os termos contratuais, incluindo os termos fiscais, e por causa disso nós vimos vários contratos que foram assinados concedendo excessivos e redundantes incentivos fiscais às empresas. Estamos a falar dos contratos com a Sasol, dos contratos com a Kenmar, com a Eni, com a Anadarko, com a Vale e outros contratos que vigoram até ao momento, que foram negociados, portanto, nesta base. Alguns projetos, por conta disso, nunca chegaram a gerar o nível de renda que se esperava para estes projetos. Posso dar aqui exemplos de, por exemplo, nos últimos 10 anos, de 2009 a 2019, de acordo com os dados apresentados pelo DITI, o setor mineiro sozinho gerou apenas 700 milhões de dólares em receitas para o Estado. 700 milhões de dólares ao longo de 10 anos é quase nada para um setor bastante rico como o setor extrativo, particularmente o setor do carvão. Era expectável que por ano o país tivesse a arrecadar 500 milhões de dólares. E estamos a dizer que todo o setor mineiro, onde temos lá areias minerais pesadas, o carvão, os rubis, só estamos a gerar 700 milhões de dólares em 10 anos. No setor do gás natural, a situação, apesar de termos apenas um projeto, a situação é também dramática, uma vez que a Sasol ainda não gerou 50% das receitas que eram expectáveis a gerar ao longo dos 25 anos, e a empresa já está em implementação.
Sorry, Fatima, I've had to mute you because I wasn't able to talk to you. My understanding was the presentation today was going to be in English.
May I speak in?
Sorry, the presentation.
I can speak in English if there is no problem.
That would be amazing, only because we have a setup with the interpretations into French and into Portuguese, but not from the Portuguese. So if you could please give your presentation in English, and I'm sorry to have intervened, but otherwise we won't get any interpretation sorted. Thank you. Please, Fatima, go ahead in English if you can. Fatima, can you hear? Mukasiri, do you want to check if Fatima is able to continue in English, or if maybe we should give the floor to someone else?
She's coming in. Sorry, guys, for this technical issue. I was saying that Mozambique is coming from a context where the natural resources agreement were based on obsolete fiscal regime, because the legislation was passed in 1980s. So meaning that to rule 2000 agreement. So this was really outdated, and that gives a lot of discretionary power to the state, to the government itself, to negotiate terms of contract, to offer the fiscal benefits, particularly exemptions. And we see that the majority of that contract, they benefited from redundant, excessive benefit or exemptions. We are talking about Sazol project run by South African company. We are talking about Vale, Anadarko, Eni, as a result of that situation, these projects are not generated the outcome expected. For example, DITI report stating that within 2009 to 2019, the mining sector itself that generated in revenues for the state $700 million. One was expected only for projects to generate $500 million per year, and we are talking about $700 million in 10 years. So that tells a lot how much the state is losing by offering these incentives. In that sector, the situation is not different. We have ongoing just one project in Mbani, right? South African company Sazol, which has a concession for 25 years, and they already 17 years, but in that paid in tax the correspondent to almost 50% of the expected revenue. We are talking about The expected revenue is $2 billion in 25 years, but they're talking about almost $800 million in that 17 years. The question is, in the remaining 8 years, will them be able to generate all the revenues expected to make this $2 billion? Of course, no. There is no only problem with excessive fiscal benefits or incentives, but there is a good and also price, abusive price, the way they determine how the price will be applicable based on ups and downs. I can explain that in detail during our interaction. Also, there is related to the cost. So costs, price, and fiscal benefits are the main factors that affect the fiscal mobilization to the state in case of extractives. Mozambique has a fiscal regime based for petroleum sector on production sharing. So we have a methodology which gives a share of production between the company and the state. That was until 2014 a negotiable aspect. The reform held in 2014. This was established in the law, so there is no more negotiations about that. So are fixed in terms of production share. We have for that sector also royalties based on ad valorem methodology and income tax, and also we have dividends paid by the state-owned enterprise. In this case, is Empresa Nacional de Hidrocarbonetos. For mining sector, we have also production tax, which is also based on ad valorem methodology, income tax, and in 2014 was included within our law a resource rent, mineral resource rents, which is a kind of tax that captures excess of gains for the company. So this deals a lot with dividends that the company has regarding the ups of the price of the resources. We also have capital gains in our system, fiscal system, but these once there is a transition in terms of selling of NX assets. So the terms of taxation of these capital gains are fixed in the law, but in past was negotiable. We saw some friction within the government and the tax institution. Regarding the situation now, we see the Rovuma Basin project moving forward very fast. We are afraid that the Rovuma Basin doesn't provide these outcomes expected in terms of revenue. Some assessments are talking about more than $100 billion in the next 25 years, counting from 2024. But because of these excessive and redundant fiscal benefits, also because of the price, we know that the market now is not good for gas because the LNG prices are indexed to the oil itself. Also, the issue related to the costs are also important. We are talking about an investment about $25 billion for Anadarko's Total now project. For ExxonMobil project is almost $10 billion. All these costs are recoverable costs, and the way they are recovered is almost 100% because of this discretionary power that the government had to negotiate that time with companies. So these will create an erosion in terms of possibility to the state to collect more revenues because the companies has to recover what they invested first. Now, in 2014, the government agreed with the company a parallel or alternative fiscal exemptions that allow the companies to export all the revenues that they get or earn from the selling of natural gas exploited from the country. So there is a risk for these companies to use the fiscal non-transparent jurisdiction, this fiscal paradise, to put that revenue. So open these, how can I say, these offshore accounts, and from there they can make up their account. So the way the state will real tax will be based on that information. And we know how these non-transparent jurisdictions work. So that was a mechanism that states created for the company, but that will help them to practice the illicit financial flows. So this is a risk for the country to deal with illicit financial flows in the way that the companies will allocate the resources they earn from the selling or exportation of the resources. But also it's important to mention that the fact that the state is getting loans considering the revenues from gas sector is also a mechanism for illicit financial flows. This is another discussion that we can move forward in our conversation. Actually, we see that there are other risks, fiscal risks related to the climate agreements. We know that most of our countries are ratified climate agreements, and because of that, some projects will not continue because of this shift in terms of the kind of projects to be implemented. In case of Mozambique, these LNG projects in Rovuma Basin will be mainly affected in the development phase, because as we know, the financiers, the traditional financiers for the fuel fossils are shifting for clean and renewable energies. So these will be really challenging for these companies to finance themselves at longer term. So as much expensive these finances are, the costs of that financing will be reflected on the revenue collection from the state. So it's important to take that agreement has a risk for fiscal in future. So that seems for us that the dream for our countries to become independent based on their natural resource will be shifted or will be affected with a new kind of dependence, because we know that the European Union, for example, is now developing a kind of a package to compensate the rich resource countries that will be harmed by these climate agreement. So we will be depending on our resources, we will be depending on the kind of a compensation from European Union and other Western countries. So this is open up for another kind of dependence. So we need to look at as a platform carefully these risks, because we have chances now to create resource mobilization for our countries based on our own resources. So to finalize, and regarding to these energy shift or changes, it's important for us to learn some lessons regarding that mechanism that is being considered by the Western, is the RED Plus initiative, which is related to is initiative related to reducing emissions, deforestation, and degradation, forest degradation, which was supposed to reach countries, the high polluters, to compensate our countries which are less polluters because of their low contribution to the global warming, but that doesn't happen according to the expected. So regarding these climate agreements, how will it work regarding that now the REDD+ is not working. So for me, is that we need to be careful for the reforms that are needed to be done in our countries regarding the fiscal regime that needs to ring fence, as my colleague from Tanzania mentioned, reducing the discretionary power for the state to negotiate and to provide these tax exemptions. We need to have institutions properly created the costs, because the companies are inflicting costs, and that is harming the taxes from based on sales agreements, and the tax issues are dealt in that sales agreement. And because of that sales agreements, which are not public, are not in public domain, they agree on the kind of prices that will be applicable in terms of high or lower price. So all these elements, and now we need to include these climate agreements, that the shift from projects to clean energies, to look all these, how it will affect our country. So I think that we as Africans need to make processes related that has a fiscal impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima, and again to all the participants. Apologies, the translation could not work for Portuguese to English, and we had that glitch. Bear with us, please. We are now running a bit out of time. I think 2-3 key issues that are very clear. We can't talk about revenue generation, counting the costs, counting the benefits without looking at the costs. The issue
Sorry, Mukasiri, we can't hear you. So everyone, it seems that Mukasiri is having some sound problems.
Yeah, sorry, I lost internet temporarily. That's frustrating.
Okay.
Can we please move on to Gideon? Can you try in 10 minutes? I know we are squeezing you 8 to 10 minutes. Share Ugandan experience. What it is like. I think I've read a fantastic report from Uganda on money in the pipeline, the implications of double taxation agreements, doing financial modeling to forecast the cost of tax incentives and their impact on human development. Over to you, Gideon, to question.
Oh, thank you, Mukasiri, for that introduction. And this is me, Kwasi Gideon, and I'm the chairperson of Publish What You Pay Uganda. And I'm also the executive director of Institute for Development Impact Awareness, which is a national NGO. So to our dear listeners, I want to let you know that Uganda in 2006 discovered the oil, petroleum resources. But prior to that, even then, we had several other minerals. So we are a country blessed with several minerals. But when the question of oil came in, I think mostly the debate changed. The debate now mostly was skewed to oil and gas, the production, because of the potential of the monies it is likely to bring into the economy. And because of that, we have found it very hard. We have found it very hard to talk about the other sector, the other mining sector of several minerals. And yet, I want you to also know that in this country, the biggest foreign exchange earner, for example, is gold. It is the third foreign exchange earner for the country. But this is a mineral where only the participants are mainly artisanal. Like over 99% of the producers of gold are artisanal. And these artisanals are not even registered to pay taxes in any way. So there are those conflicts where people are indeed extracting resources, but the government is not able to tap into them. But even then, even then, when I told you when in 2006 we discovered this oil, we presumed that indeed it will bring in several dollars to the economy, and as that we decided to go in for a fiscal policy, a fiscal regime that would enable us to benefit from these incomes. And when I talk about fiscal regime in Uganda's case, we mean the set of laws, rules, regulations, agreements, and then that govern the economic benefit derived from extractive exploration and production. And this fiscal regime in Uganda is mostly aimed at ensuring sustainable use of the resources, then equitable distribution of the benefits to all the stakeholders. And then more importantly, it is also aimed at curbing fraud, corruption, and the illicit behaviors that is common in the sector. Then also the fiscal regime also looks at the conflict management mechanisms, and then the ability to attract domestic and foreign investments. So yes. Now, as a country, I want you to know that our case is quite peculiar in a sense that we have a country that is very responsive. Every time we ask them for a certain law, they are very quick to act. They are very quick to give us the law. Even when we ask the regulation, the government is really very fast to also give us that law that we have asked. So when it comes to issues of fiscal policy, laws, regulations, most of them as a country, we have them in place. For example, we have the Public Finance Management Act. It is, I think, the most important of all these laws regarding the fiscal policy, because it states out how the monies from both the mining and then the oil and gas will be used, how they will be utilized. And also in place, I want you to know that we have several contracts and agreements that have been signed. Then also the institutional structures, we have them in place. For example, the audit agencies, we have the revenue collection agents, which is URA. We have the sector regulator, which is the sector coordinator. We have the policy coordination agents, which is the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, and those who are on the platform, you heard from them yesterday. We also have several actors where civil society is part. So we have been given that platform. Now for us, the biggest problem is how do we put the several laws, regulations that we have as a country to govern the fiscal regime into practice? Because indeed, so much has been done in terms of the law. We have reviewed them again and again, but what is on the ground is really not enough. The implementation has been so much poorer. If we could do, in fact, people were saying that if we could only implement a half of the laws, the regulations that we have in place for the sector, then we would have gone a long way. We would achieve a lot. Also, I want to let you know that as I told you that I'm the chairperson of Publish What You Pay. As Publish What You Pay, for example, we have previously been advocating for the country to join the EITI, and thanks to our work in 2020, August 2020. The country was admitted the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative by the EITI International Secretariat. And for us, when we are advocating for this, we were basing on the fact that if we could join EITI, then we could be able to have a country that is transparent, that is accountable, and especially in extractives. And since we have joined, we are looking forward to seeing what happens. But still, our fear, like I have said, is implementation. Can our government implement these things? Because if anything, if we have learned from history, is that the government is very fast to give us the policies, the regulations, the laws, but is very slow when it comes to implementation. So our work will be mainly now going forward. I think our work as civil society in Uganda, as Publish What You Pay, we shall mostly be looking at issues to do with government implementing some of the issues in the fiscal policies. I will give you some of the examples. For example, the Public Finance Management Act of 2015 provided for the establishment of the Petroleum Fund to act as a stabilization and deposit trust for the revenue from the petroleum operations. And this was in an attempt to mitigate the negative consequences associated with oil and gas resources, especially when a lot of money is coming unexpectedly. So many issues tend to happen. For example, we have been talking of the issue of the Dutch disease, where the countries decided to depend on only one resource for their incomes. And so when this petroleum fund was set up, the act provided for how that fund will even be used. For example, it would be used to cater for issues to do with development, but how we use that money and how it is normally gotten out of the fund, it has been contentious. Because I want you to know that from the oil bonuses, the few taxes we have managed to collect over 3.5 million US dollars already. And but when you look at the fund, the fund literally has no money, and how the money is used, when it is gotten, how it is gotten, these are some of the implications that the country is, as a country, we are facing. And so for us is, I think mostly we have to continue lobbying and advocating for issues to do with transparency and accountability in the sector. If the down person, the people down are able to benefit from this sector. And of course, you know, these issues of how we benefit is normally driven by also partly the sustainable development goals, where we are looking at ending poverty in all its forms. But most people who are active in the sector are literally the most poverty stricken. It is the middlemen who normally benefit, and then the merchants of capital. I love calling them merchants of capital. Others call them these investors, the multinationals. They benefit at the expense of the what? At the expense of the locals. Even when we have, like I've told you, these so many laws, regulations in place that are governing the sector. So again, we shall be looking at ensuring that the government practices what preaches, what is on paper is also what is on the ground. That's what we shall be looking at as civil society in Uganda, and ensuring even when these monies are bought, that they are put to do the right use, which people can see. People want tangible things. We want to see good schools, hospitals, and infrastructure in place. But in most areas where some of these minerals are, when you go to one part of the country, which is Karamoja, you find that things are not in order. Yet a lot of minerals are being mined. The issues of climate change, the issues of environment are not looked into. So we, like I've told you, we shall, going forward, for us is mostly ensuring that what the fiscal policies in place, what are all are implemented by the government, and that we shall continue advocating as a group and with all the other stakeholders. I know that I was given a few minutes by the chair, and if there are any questions, I can still continue and address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gideon. Thank you very much for that great presentation. Now I'm going to quickly read some of the questions that have been raised in comments. And after that, I would need assistance for French comments and questions. And then we give the time to the presenters to respond, because our time is limited. We could have said, given the floor to participants also to raise their hands and be able to speak. So from Donald Kisongi, Russia, China, EU, US are pulling the strings, holding Africa in different directions. How significant are the risks in natural resource or extractives governance for Africa? Then to Fatima, does Mozambique have a mines and mineral policy? I have someone also to assist me in French, some of the comments and questions, and then we'll give the presenters the chance to respond and also give their final remarks as we wind up the conversation. Thank you. So I need assistance to read comments that are written in French or questions.
Hi, I can see a question here from Emmanuel Segadji. Je voudrais savoir si le fait de parler de code d'investissement attrayant, est-ce que cet aspect ne va pas mettre en péril les intérêts des populations autochtones? I'm not sure, Mukasey, who this will be addressed to, but hopefully with the interpretation, the panelists will be able to hear the question and see who it is for, and then get in touch with you in order to answer. I can't see any other questions in. There is another question, sorry, from Marie Mbatio Ndaye. Que propose la société civile tanzanienne pour plus de transparence dans la distribution des revenus? Donc ça, c'était une question pour la première panéliste du panel. Nous avons aussi une question de Billy Arthur Nganji. Au-delà de l'aspect institutionnel, quel mécanisme les communautés à la base en Afrique de l'Ouest développent pour tirer bénéfice de l'extraction des ressources minières? That is all the questions I can see in French to be answered. Kazi, how do you want to start this?
No, would you repeat the question, the translation of the question from Maria? Maria from Maria Mpatio Ndiaye. Could you please translate that again for us, please.
Of course. So the question here was, que propose la société civile tanzanienne pour plus de transparence dans la distribution des revenus?
Rachel,
Could you put it in English, please? Sorry.
The question is, she said, at the local level, the revenues are in the hands of the authorities. Is there real transparency in the use of these resources? And what Tanzanian civil society is proposing for more transparency in revenue distribution? Rachel, did you get the question?
Yes, I did.
Great.
Thank you.
Sorry, my internet is going up and down, but this is the opportunity in less than a minute to each presenter to respond to some of the questions and comments that have emanated from the participants, and also give your final remarks. Please try to stick to time. Thank you. Can I start with Viola? Colleagues, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Can hear you.
Yes, Viola, and in the same order, please respond in less than a minute, respond and also giving your final remarks. Thanks.
Thanks, Mukasiri. It's been an interesting discussion. I think for me, my point is that minerals, oil and gas are location specific. And so it's really important for governments to, who are in charge of the jurisdictions where minerals, oil and gas are located, to be in charge and make laws and amendments and policies that secure the maximum benefits for their countries. I think that's really important as a starting point, and continuously we are seeing government reaching out, we are seeing government amending the laws to ensure that they are reaping the full benefits from the extractive sector, which has the capacity to finance their sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Over to you. Thank you, Viola. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. For the first question from Maria, says civil society, what are civil society proposing to, is civil society proposing to have more transparency on revenue distribution? Maybe a quick one is that there has been partial transparency in terms of disclosure, but management is still a challenge. And that is why we as civil society are advocating strongly to have a specific mining revenue management act that will enable the understanding on how such revenues are collected, but also distributed across. I've seen my colleague Paula has answered that. The second question is that it is true that most of the all our revenues from the mining sector are collected under one basket fund, apart from royalties that are collected by the Ministry of Minerals. However, for the revenues that are, for the taxes that are collected under this basket fund, it's difficult to track how they have been allocated to different votes. With the royalties that are collected by the Ministry of Minerals, through the budget processes, you can easily track and monitor the extent to which such revenues have been used to invest into development projects. The main challenge over the past 5 years and in our different analysis is that, I'm just summarizing, the biggest challenge with, for instance, the management of revenues from royalties is that most of the fund, almost 70% of the funds that are collected in the spirit of royalties have been used to to fund for other charges like salaries, but there's little political will to invest more on development projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm told that we are supposed now to move to another, the same room or link is being used by other sessions. So we need to wind up right now. And apologies for other panelists that could not get the opportunity to give their closing remarks. But I'm sure these are conversations that we are going to continue partnering as Texas Network Africa with Publish What You Pay in different sub-regions and country level and also at continental level to continue discussion on taxation of the extractive sector. Thank you very much for the robust contributions and the lively interaction via the question and answer session. Bye.